the new SEC.
Week 13. This is the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. We got Hunter Zeisman here. Hunter, we only got 2 more weeks of regular season football left. What are the feelings as we get into this Week 13 preview?
When you're in the last 2 weeks, it's a spot where you're kind of looking around and seeing what not only your team needs, but I'm looking at what other teams need to have happen. If you've listened to past episodes, you know I'm an Alabama fan, so I'm also looking at Missouri this week. If you are a Georgia fan, you're looking at this Ole Miss Florida game, you're looking at the Alabama Oklahoma game. So last 2 weeks, you know what you need, and that's the story for this week for me.
Yep. I think that's definitely a story. You know what you need. And for a lot of teams in the SEC, they're still in it. For some teams, they're not still in it, but they're playing for bowl games. Florida right now, if they're able to win their last couple games, they can get into a bowl game, or just one win can get them into a bowl game. We got some great games this week. Ole Miss, Florida, Alabama, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, LSU, a couple, we'll say bye games in the SEC, and we'll talk about it in our SEC roundup as well. But it's like you said, right? At this point in the season, it's all about what do you need in the SEC. And it's the same story across the other conferences as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the SEC is kind of that front runner when it comes to the rankings. There's, potentially 5 SEC teams that can get into the playoff. They're the most likely to get the most amount of teams in there. So a lot of teams are sitting on the edge of their seat still. And like you mentioned, Florida's still playing for bowl eligibility. Arkansas right there with an easy game this week to make them bowl eligible. Auburn would have to win out. Kentucky would have to win out. But don't count them out. It's November. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen in November. And we saw that last week across the other conferences. And we're going to see that probably again this week in the SEC. And so for this episode, we're going to go really quickly through what we call our SEC roundup, just high level talking about some of the SEC bye games. There's 4 teams in the conference playing not necessarily G5 competition, but also some FCS competition. We're going to go through our games of the week. So we'll give you full previews across 6 games in the conference. And then we'll do our typical around the country segment. So talking about some of the best games around the country. That's ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and the group of 5 and independent. And in the group of 5 independent, we have 2 teams playing each other, an Army and Notre Dame. But when we talk about the SEC roundup, we got Georgia playing UMass. Georgia's 3rd in the conference right now, still obviously playing for the SEC championship and also playing for a playoff berth. Tennessee's playing UTEP, University of Texas El Paso. South Carolina's playing Wofford, and Arkansas's playing Louisiana Tech. Hunter, you were looking at the records of the opponents before we started recording here, and so what's kind of the story there, if there's any story at all?
Yeah, these teams are definitely not super capable. We saw Alabama Mercer last week, where Mercer was a team that was performing a little bit above maybe expectations, but you have UMass, UTEP, 2-8 at this point on the season, Wofford and La Tech. I've said this before, I'd be lying if I said I watched much ball from those teams. So, I don't really know what to expect from these games other than the SEC teams to kind of go out and do their thing, maybe try out a couple quarterbacks for the future like we've seen teams do in past weeks. For South Carolina this week, I think that they maybe are wishing that they scheduled someone a little bit tougher because they need that resume booster. They're like one of those teams that's skill-wise could be in the playoff, but resume-wise, it might not say it yet just from all the teams in front of them. Now they play Wofford. They're kind of sitting at home at that point waiting to see what happens with other teams. But, I wouldn't expect anything but all of these teams to win by double digits plus.
Yeah, definitely expecting double digits. I think you were talking about the Arkansas spread was minus 23. Seems a little bit low given the competition with Louisiana Tech out of Ruston, Louisiana. But, for them, still believe in a spot to play for a bowl game, right? So you want to win this one. This should be an easy out-of-conference G5 game. And I agree with you. The other 3 teams we talked about, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, are also playing for playoff spots. So on one hand, you kind of would like what should be a cruise game. On the other hand, it wouldn't probably be bad to have a good out-of-conference game. So
you're looking for a resume booster.
So that makes sense. But that kind of rounds up our SEC roundup. Those are some of the we'll say bye games of the week, or the games that are, probably not going to fill up the stands, probably going to be on SEC Network or other networks. But nonetheless, still important for these SEC teams to reach some of their goals, whether it's a bowl game, a win, keeping a head coaching job, or continuing to find themselves in the playoff discussion.
Yeah, they're riding on some Arkansas fans, some South Carolina fans buying ESPN Plus to watch their team this week. So buy it for a week, cancel. Yeah,
So, in terms of the SEC games of the week here at the new SEC podcast, we got a full slate of 6 good games, I would say. A lot of them have major implications. And the first game we're going to cover here is Ole Miss going to Florida. This is the new SEC podcast game of the week. Overall, right now, the over-under is 55.5. We're recording this on Monday night. And Ole Miss is favored by 10.5. That's a very large spread, given the football we've seen Florida played. And so, Hunter, what are some of your initial thoughts when you think about this game?
Yeah, I think I got to look at what Ole Miss does well, what Florida does well, and maybe the discrepancies on the two sides. Although Lagway did not play in the Florida-Texas game, when you're looking at Ole Miss's offense, you have to take into consideration what Texas was able to do in that game against Florida. And I think Ole Miss plays a similar style of football. The depth of target's a little bit deeper. They're throwing the ball downfield, and it worked for Texas. I think that Ole Miss offensively has the opportunity to do that in this game. Now, it was probably because Florida's offense wasn't on the field too long. Now that Lagway's back, if you listen to our recap episode from last week, the Florida team has been different with him at the helm.
Yep. Florida team has looked significantly different with Lagway at the helm. He's definitely been the story of the season for that Florida team. And we talked about Ball from a rushing perspective as well. But for Ole Miss, you're completely right. Their offense has the ability to play similar to a Texas, who both have those weapons across the field. Wells, Watkins, maybe we see Trey Harris back this game potentially, and so it could pose a challenge for this Florida defense, which is still kind of teetering at bottom 5 in the conference, but has played some improved football of late.
Yeah, if you're stacking some different stats around the SEC or college football in general, you're going to find Ole Miss at the top of a lot of those. And it's not from a lack of competition played. I mean, they're first in sacks in the country by a wide margin, almost getting 5 per game. They have maybe the best pass rush in all of college football, one of the best linebackers in the country. And that's a lot to deal with if you're Florida. Lagway would be the guy to do it, especially if he's slinging the ball downfield. I'm not sure if Florida's O-line can hold this off. I think it's going to be more on Florida's defense to see if they can stop Ole Miss from an offensive standpoint.
Absolutely. And, we don't talk about him as much, maybe because it's expected at this point, but Jackson Dart is sitting at, top 5 in the country right now when it comes to yards and touchdowns on the season. And, one thing I think in Florida's defense, if you're looking for a sign of optimism for this offensive line, is how they played against Georgia, at least until Lagway left the game. So I think although I believe Ole Miss has a stronger defense than Georgia does, we saw that when Ole Miss played Georgia. I do think if you see that Florida offensive line and offensive performance those first 3 quarters, this could be a much closer game than a 10.5 point spread.
Yeah. I think it'll be an interesting performance from Florida. Like offensively, I think they'll have a couple things click. They're going to have a hard time running the ball, which has been the saving grace and what's opened up some things for the offense. Lagway is doing great at throwing the ball downfield. They're just going to struggle to run. Ole Miss, another thing, they're number 1 in the nation in opponent yards per carry, only giving up like just over 2 yards per carry, which is crazy. But when I'm looking at Ole Miss, I was trying to figure out, when they played LSU, like, what did other teams do that worked effectively against them at certain times? And it was throwing the ball downfield when they could make that happen. LSU was one of the teams to do that. Lagway's been doing that. It's just all about getting him the time to do it. So really, though, I like Ole Miss's offense in this game more than anything, and I think that's going to be the reason why I think Ole Miss wins.
I like it. I like it. Ole Miss's offense is really strong. What I put in the notes for this game is the Swamp home field advantage back. Florida is 4-2 at home, coming off of a big home win over LSU. I like Florida in this game. I'm going to go on a whim, and I'm going to pick Florida in this one. I think it'll make some fans happy in the SEC. I like Florida to take this game 30-24.
Okay. I mean, I like it. I think the home field advantage is definitely something to me. Ole Miss right now with so much to play for, sitting right on the fringe of a playoff team. I think that they're surging. I think that they have the potential to do this. I like Ole Miss winning big in covering. I like Ole Miss 42-17.
Okay.
They're leading the country in big plays. They're throwing the ball downfield. I think that that's a recipe for a lot of points.
I could definitely see that outcome happening. I just feel like there's a little bit of SEC magic happening in this one potentially. Florida's looking improved right now. Ole Miss is a better team. I'm not saying it's Florida's a better team, but I like Florida in this one. Hunter likes Ole Miss in this one. It's a swamp, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, right? Missouri's taking on Mississippi State. the theme for this game is, which Missouri and Mississippi State teams do we see on Saturday? The over-under is 57.5, and Missouri's favored by 8.
Yeah, I think this will be the best performance from the Missouri offense we see this year, from a passing standpoint, especially. Something that hasn't clicked at its entire level if you're looking at the offensive weapons that they have in the passing game. And that comes down to Mississippi State having one of the worst passing defenses in the league. Um, People are throwing on them 72% completion rate. This would be the game for Missouri to make it click. And that's what I think the story of this game is going to be. The team that we see out of Mississippi State, I think we know who they are. I think they have you mentioned the word and I liked it. They have a gritty offense that keeps them in games, and the score doesn't necessarily represent who they are. But I think if we get both of those teams, then that's a recipe for Missouri.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like Missouri a lot of times in these offensive shootouts. We've seen them play these types of games against Vanderbilt. We kind of saw it last week against South Carolina. Just the South Carolina offense is newly and improved, and the defense is pretty solid too. But Missouri, a lot of their games this year against Auburn, against Oklahoma, they've been able to kind of do just enough offensively to take it over the top. And the reason is guys like Brady Cook, it's guys like Theo Weiss. We always talk about it. We see the comments. People love Theo Weiss, they love Luther Burden, and both of those guys got super involved last game despite the loss. The question is like, does Mississippi State have an answer for that type of dual, receiving threat? And we haven't seen it this season. So it's almost like we'd be betting against what we've already seen if we were saying Mississippi State has an answer for those two guys.
No, and they don't necessarily even have an answer should they decide to keep the ball on the ground. Like the Mississippi State rushing defense hasn't been good either. Over 220 yards per game on the ground given up to opponents. So they're not necessarily performing on either side. So for Missouri, it's a pick your poison type of thing. If you want to keep the ball on the ground, you could do that. Keep your guys healthy and see where the season goes for you. So no, I don't think that they have an answer defensively. I think that their answer would come offensively in the style of a shootout. Like South Carolina last week, they were with such a good defense, they were giving up some points to Missouri, but they were able to outperform offensively. Mississippi State has done well in scoring in games. It just hasn't been enough to keep them in it. So I think it would have to be a shootout style win for Mississippi State.
Yeah, I agree there with you. This Missouri defense, like you said, has shown some gaps. Michael Van Buren over at Mississippi State's looked, decent for a freshman, but he's shown some improvement. They're looking okay. Johnny Daniels will have to get involved in the rushing game for Mississippi State to have a shot to win this game, or at least keep it close. The spread, of course, we talked about it. It's 8 for Missouri. So do you think that they cover? What's kind of your final prediction here for Missouri, Mississippi State?
I think that they cover. I think that you have some seniority at quarterback. He's been a little banged up here and out on the season. And should he sit in the pocket, dice this up with the QB IQ that I think that he would have in a game like this, where it's going to be a little bit softer coverage. I like Missouri covering. I like them 35-20 is what I got here. It just sits right on the under, but I do like the under on the game. I think that they could settle into some field goals here and there, settle into the run game a little bit.
Yeah, I like it. I definitely like it. I'm going to go 38-20. So I'm pretty close to what you have.
Yeah.
I'll give him an extra field goal there. I think that, Brady Cook, he's heating up. Maybe we see Drew Pine come in if they don't really need Cook at a certain point in the game. I just have to go with what we've seen from this Missouri football team playing decently quality football, and Mississippi State, still kind of searching for some key SEC wins. Next game, one of the bigger games, 7:30 p.m. Alabama taking on Oklahoma. Right now, the over-under is 47.5. Alabama's favored by 14. Vegas likes them big. What do we like here at the new SEC podcast in this game, and what do we think are the keys to the game, and what should we expect from this Jackson Arnold-led offense and this Jalen Milroe-led offense?
Yeah, and it's tough because Alabama right now is playing some of the best football they had in the season to date. Oklahoma started out a little rough, but we're starting to see a bit of a resurgence. They're doing better and better every week. Right now, I think this Oklahoma defense is built to beat Alabama right now. The way that this Oklahoma defense has performed in the rushing game defensively, they're swarming to the run. They're great tacklers. We've seen what they've done against Dylan Sampson this season, Jarquez Hunter. They held those guys to under 100 yards both times. So, yeah, I think that if Alabama tries to come out and play this new style of let's pound the rock football, it could be tough to do under the lights there in Norman.
Yeah, it could definitely really make for a tough game for them. We talked about what Oklahoma's defense has been able to do, but I think for Alabama, I don't know if this Oklahoma offense is able to do enough. They brought in Jackson Arnold. We've seen some improved, performances against Missouri and against some of these other teams. It still hasn't been enough to kind of take them over the hump. With
Yeah.
Oklahoma kind of struggling here in the SEC for their first season.
Yeah, they've gotten better, and it's been the story of not asking Arnold to do too much with the ball, keeping it closer to the line of scrimmage. Javante Barnes has been performing a little bit better, but it's all about the injuries and the weapons that they've had. They haven't really had the strongest receiving core, and that's been hurting them in the games to this point where now Jackson Arnold, you don't have guys to go out and be all-star playmakers and get big plays, so you're kind of having to slice and dice your way up the field. Alabama right now defensively is picking teams off. They're
Yep.
doing well at shutting down the opposition when it comes to running, when it comes to QB runs, and that's something that Jackson Arnold's going to try to do. I'm not sure what Oklahoma's offense is going to do in this game to catch Alabama's defense off guard.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the challenge with the Venables teams of late. The last couple of years, we saw their OC got let go earlier this year. One thing I liked against Mercer was their ability to get Ryan Williams involved on the ground. We saw a pretty big run from him. You're not one of the coaches for Alabama, but do you think that we could see some plays like that this game, or how could you see Alabama best using Ryan Williams creatively to really blow this game open?
I think that right now, I think that they'll use him downfield like they did earlier in the year. I think we're going to get back to a little bit of that. But I think more than anything, seeing the way that teams play him, they're bringing some guys out, they're putting their safety over there,
Yep.
which is kind of why some of his numbers in receiving have gone down. They're getting more guys involved. I think
Yep.
that's how they're going to use Ryan Williams, is to help get more guys involved. We saw Caleb Odom play a little bit more last week and get some targets. So it's not just the Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams show. You're going to have some other guys get involved, but I think Ryan Williams will still get his fair share of shots downfield.
Definitely.
4+2 = 6.
That's what they say, right? And the math adds up, right? You don't need a calculator for that one to understand what those two numbers add up to. And so, if Oklahoma does have a shot in this game, is it more about them slowing down Alabama? And you might mention this earlier. Is it more about them slowing down this offense?
Yeah.
Or is it more about their offense being able to overpower this defense?
I think they have to throw Alabama's offensive game plan out, and that's running the ball. I think, Alabama knows coming into this game that running the ball could be difficult. But if you catch Alabama, we've seen it this year, they've caught themselves in a lot of third downs that need some low percentage plays to happen. And if you get Alabama at 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, because their running isn't going anywhere, Alabama's not necessarily built for that, right? Like they're more of a get some chunks here and there, put us in 3rd and manageable. Let's pound the rock. That's what they've done well as of late. Oklahoma can stop that. If they do, play the field position game, keep it in a low scoring game, they could do it. I don't think Oklahoma could win in some sort of shootout scenario, though.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And one of the questions I asked myself was, should I expect a performance like Alabama versus Missouri? Not necessarily from a rushing the ball perspective, but just a game control, 31 zip. Should I expect like an LSU performance? Or do I expect, one of these closer games, right? Early on, maybe we kind of see Alabama sputtering to start off with getting adjusted to this Oklahoma defense that is sitting, kind of top in the SEC. Not number one, but up there. That's kind of what I was asking myself when it comes to this game.
I think that's a good read on the game. I could see that 100% being the case. A little bit of a slower start, USF-ish, where they took a while to get going and then blew it open late. Or just maybe in this game they don't blow it open at all, and it's a close one like South Carolina or something like that, where they might have felt like they had a better handle on the game than they went out there and performed and executed on. So yeah, if Alabama, they're going to have to work on the pass a little bit more. I think that's the story of the next 2 weeks for them. Playing Auburn next, it's going to be a similar thing where they're going to have maybe some troubles running the ball exclusively or 60% of the time like they have been lately. So I like Alabama, though. I think that they've been playing good football as of late. It's a tough one to go on the road, but you know what you're playing for. You win out, you're in the playoff. You win out and you get some help from some others. You're in the SEC championship game. It's a lot more that they're playing for than Oklahoma is. There's pride on the line. I get it, but I like Alabama 34-17.
Okay. So you like them covering. I think, I like that score. I like that prediction. I think Oklahoma, it's still Bama. So every team's going to give Bama their best shot. So I would say they're playing to kind of be spoiler, to have that marquee win going into next season. I'm going to challenge that a little bit. But I feel like the 14-point spread is favorable. I think Bama is able to win this one, 35-14. So should be a good one for the Roll Tide fans if it plays out that way. And for Boomer Sooner Nation, maybe they have the chance to pull off an upset here, right? We always talk about playing with house money, so this could be one of those games where they could potentially make something happen. Texas A&M is taking on Auburn. They're going out there to Auburn. Over under for this game is 47.5. Texas A&M or TAMU is favored by 2.5. Marcel Reed show back in action. Auburn, Peyton Thorne, don't look now. 5 tutties last week. 3 with Cam Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think?
They're riding. I mean, it's a good game. It is against the opponent that it is. It's not Texas A&M, especially not defensively. From a DB standpoint, maybe it's pretty similar. We've seen Texas A&M DBs been a little bit porous at times and able to let some plays happen. So we could see it roll into this week. A little bit of a QB wide receiver connection, KLS getting involved, Cam Coleman getting involved. Where I'm hesitant, Auburn at home has not been necessarily a good matchup for them, a good situation for Auburn. They haven't beat but one Power 4 opponent all year. That was Kentucky. Their best home win right now is against New Mexico. So right now, I don't have a whole lot to believe in Auburn for, but we saw what South Carolina did to A&M. It's an interesting spread here, that an interesting look on a game. So I'm curious too on what would happen in this game.
I'm curious as well, right? We just kind of finished wrapping up talking about the Alabama-Oklahoma game, and the over-under was 47.5. This game's 47.5 as well. Alabama and A&M play similar offenses, very run-heavy, right? Mm-hmm. Expect a lot from Marcel Reed, but this Auburn defense is pretty stingy. But we've seen them lock up a lot of top rushers, and so I'm curious kind of what this rushing offense for A&M is going to be able to do against Auburn, because I think that'll be the story of the game versus what offensively Auburn can do.
Yeah. A&M, it's going to look a little different. Le'Veon Moss is not going to be playing. So he's out with the injury. Amari Daniels and EJ Smith with Marcel Reed. Like, you do have a rushing attack, right? Like they're rushing guys that can perform. It's going to look a little bit different because of how good Auburn's rush defense is. Like, that's the thing where they're excelling. So you're going to have to now ask Marcel Reed to throw the ball a little bit. Yep. They haven't asked him to do it. When he does go out there and throws the ball, it's done pretty well. We saw him have the bad interception last week, but all in all, like, he's able to do it. I like Auburn's defense though in this game to force A&M out of their typical game plan.
Yep, I definitely agree with you. And if I'm an Auburn fan, like I said, I talked about it when we first started this segment. I would be a little bit excited about Peyton Thorne, just given what we saw last week. It obviously has not been against Power 4 competition, but he's shown that he has the ability. We could maybe see something this week. Cam Coleman, we talked about J. Lambert Smith, the top 5 wide receiver in the SEC right now with KLS. Mm-hmm. This A&M secondary has shown that they've had some abilities to get picked off. And so I would worry if I'm A&M, like, I wouldn't want to give Auburn any hope in this game. Like, I wouldn't want it to be 14-10 at half or 17-10, because then you're playing an Auburn game. You're playing a low scoring, low offense game where Auburn can hang around, kind of similar to what we saw against Missouri, where they didn't win it, but they were still in it to almost win.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I mean, you mentioned the DB play, and like, you don't want to let Auburn hang around in this game. The safety help has been huge for A&M. If you're looking at just one-on-one, and if you're Auburn and you find one-on-one matchups with these receivers and you're Peyton Thorne, throw the ball. Like, let him take a shot at making a play on it. It's worked. From Peyton Thorne's standpoint and the effectiveness that he has, I don't think that he'll be as effective as Lenora Sellers was because of his ability to evade the tackle. And that's what made that game so tough for Texas A&M, is that they were getting to the quarterback. They just couldn't bring him down.
Yeah.
And this one, if they do that same thing, they would have like 7+ sacks, if they do that in this game. So it's up to Auburn's O-line to look at what Texas A&M has done in past games with pass rush and stop that and give Peyton Thorne enough time. It's kind of hard to compare the Texas A&M team of that game to this one because of the quarterback's ability on the opposing side.
100%. I mean, and we are both in agreement that Peyton Thorne is not Lenora Sellers.
Yeah.
That goes
Yeah.
without saying, but I had to mention it. I had to say it. So,
Yeah.
final predictions in this one, and any keys you think we should focus on for this game.
Yeah. A&M, just effective tackling. I mean, bring them down when they get the ball. Don't let things build up on you. You know, they're going to throw the ball. They're going to run the ball well. Like Darqueze Hunter is going to get a fair amount of touches in this game.
Yep.
If you're tackling well, I think that A&M wins here. They have goals ahead of them. They have a clear path. They're one of the two teams in the SEC that have their championship and playoff hopes in their hands. So I like them here. A&M 24, Auburn 13. I think the under, interestingly, in such a low scoring game of 47.5, I do like the under in this one too. I think under is kind of my play of the week around the board.
Even all under.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely been all under. You know, I think the keys for me for this game for Auburn, if they want to have a chance to win, build on what you do well. You talked about the rushing defense; it's one of their strengths. You know, don't allow yourself to turn the ball over. If you turn the ball over, the game's over. Like I think if they get one turnover on top of what A&M has proven to do, I think this one's over. For A&M, play your game. You know, run the ball, try to establish the pass. Like you said, Marcel Reed, it's like a lot of times he's not passing any more than 10 to 15 times a game. Make those passes high percentage throws, get yourselves in a good spot to have this offense excel. The defense should take care of itself. Nick Scorton and team should, you know, do what they have to do. I like A&M in this one. I think they keep the ball rolling. You ready for the final score prediction? Okay. All right. I'm gonna say 30 to 13.
Okay. All right. I thought you were gonna take them big Aggies.
No,
that's still pretty big.
Regular game, not the low one, but not the big one. Next game, we have the Vanderbilt Commodores going down to Baton Rouge to take on the LSU Tigers. Over-under in this game is 54.5. LSU is favored by 7.5. Thoughts?
Yeah. It was a game, would have been a huge game a couple weeks ago. Now both teams have a little bit of a slide as of late. LSU more than Vanderbilt. I like LSU to attack in this game again. I think that they've gotten a little bit away from their identity. Rain hurt them in the Alabama game. I think some game planning, some poor bounce back hurt them against Florida. They didn't get Kyron Lacey involved enough in the game last week. Yep. Vanderbilt's defense, I think, will lend itself to them throwing the ball to these guys a little bit more. Vanderbilt pass rush not as effective. This game looks like one where LSU's offense can perform more like they want to, whereas the opposing team isn't holding them back from that.
Absolutely. In Vanderbilt, you know, we've kind of talked about it all season that defense has been kind of their kryptonite. That's been kind of the issue the past couple games against South Carolina and against some of these other opponents. This is where, like you said, LSU should look to get guys like Kyron Lacey more involved, you know, guys like Caden Durham more involved in the rushing game. You know, and the question I asked, and you see as my theme is, like, should we expect a lot of scoring with the Tigers versus the Commodores? Offensively, I would expect LSU to score a good amount. I think that maybe Vanderbilt can get the offense back going a little bit more in this game as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we could see some scoring to the standard of these teams. Vanderbilt, we know they slow the game down a lot. They control possession of the games that they play in. And Vanderbilt loves to run the ball from the quarterback standpoint, interesting runs, just like Alabama did in that game. After the game, you know, Brian Kelly harped on the fact that they had a plan to contain the quarterback against Alabama and just didn't execute on the field. I believe him that a plan was there. I think that plan will be easier to execute in this game. So I think that they could shut down some of this, you know, weird play style of Vanderbilt that at the beginning of the season was catching a lot of teams off guard. And as slowly as the season's gone on, has become a little bit more on tape, figured out, manageable is a good way to call it. So, yeah, I think we could see some score. And I think Vanderbilt slowing in the game is maybe going to hurt a little bit of that. But LSU is going to go deep, so that could bring it back.
I could definitely bring it back. And LSU, you know, this is a big one for them being at home. Obviously, the Alabama game was not advantageous for them at home, but they were able to beat Ole Miss at home, right? I think LSU fans are just starving for a convincing win. The last time we've seen a pretty convincing win was against Arkansas. This Vanderbilt game, although they're not playing for the same goals that they had at the beginning of the season, it's a great opportunity for them to, you know, get a 7-point win or a 14-point win. 7.5 would be great for people that are taking LSU as a favorite, right? But to get a pretty convincing win to establish that this is where we are as a program.
Yeah.
This is the type of team we are. No matter how good or not good Vanderbilt is this year, it's like this is the type of program that we are.
Yeah. Yep. Use your weapons. You got good weapons out there. You got good skill. QB's got an arm. He makes some poor decisions at times, but you got receivers that are going to get open. Use it. Attack in
Yep.
the air and throw the ball deep. If you're Vanderbilt, I think you're going to struggle to do what the other teams that have beat LSU have done. It was an uncharacteristic O-line performance last week against Florida from LSU. I don't think that Vanderbilt have the same opportunities to get pressure. So if you're Vanderbilt, slow the game down. You might have an opportunity to keep it close via that, and winning there late with, in a back and forth type game. I like LSU to bounce back here. They lost against Alabama. They lost last week. I think at some point that's got to stop. I think it's here. So I like LSU 34-13.
Yeah, I think LSU sitting at about 3 or 4 in a row dropped, right? And what those teams like, Alabama was able to beat them from a rushing perspective. I don't think Vanderbilt's there from a rushing perspective. They can run pretty well, but not to Alabama's level. Ole Miss was able to beat them more in the air, and that's Vanderbilt's offensively is okay in the air. Eli Stowers is pretty decent when it comes to catching passes, but I like LSU to take this one. I'm going to say 21-10. I think it's pretty low scoring. But I like LSU in this one. Kentucky at Texas, our last game of the week. If you're watching our full episode, if you're watching the snippet, thank you for tuning in. The theme for this game is, can Texas prove they are the best team in the SEC? And how versus Kentucky? Right now, before the polls come out on Tuesday, Texas is the highest ranked SEC team in the college football playoff rankings. The over-under is 47.5. Texas is favored by a good old small number of 20.5.
Yeah. I think that maybe Texas couldn't show us that they are the best team, but I think that if with a win here, they put themselves in the position to make the playoffs, nearly 100%. Because the only game that they have after this is a game in College Station, which if they lose, they would be joining the pool of other 2-loss SEC teams. Their resume doesn't speak to the rest of the SEC teams and isn't as good, but this would be one more step on the path. Beginning of the season, I called this game as one that could be a surprise win for Kentucky. I think Kentucky defense hasn't done what before the season we thought they would do. They're dead last in college football for opponent incomplete passes per game. They're one of the bottom for completion percentage of opponents. Teams are throwing the ball all over them and having no trouble doing it.
I love that. I love those two stats because, Hunter does an amazing job of looking at the extra in-depth stats. I look at deep stats, and if you look at Kentucky's defense, they're actually like top 5 in the SEC when it comes to passing yards given up per game. But the real story of the tape are the stats that you brought up, right, and the incompletions that they're giving up. And on the other side, off from a rushing defense, they're kind of sitting at bottom, 6 in the SEC as well. And so when I think about the keys for this game for Texas, I was looking at them using guys like Jaden Blue and Quintavarius on the rushing attack, who are combined for 7 touchdowns in the season, to really pound it against Kentucky and take it to them from a offensive perspective to control the tempo of the game and to win this game.
Yeah. Teams are successfully throwing on Kentucky. They're opting to run the ball more because of they're able to do it, right? Like if you can do it. If they're giving it to you. It's interesting because Texas hasn't necessarily played that kind of football. So I could see them bringing it out in this game. They're keep their guys healthy, pound the rock a little bit, slow the game down. I think that Texas is and should be strongly favored in this game, at the 20.5 point spread. So I don't think that really there's going to be a clear path for Kentucky to stop Texas offense because of the multitude of things that they can do. What Georgia did effectively against Texas was pressuring the quarterback. We've seen Quinn Ewers multiple times this season force the ball under pressure, off target, 3 and outs, turnovers. It's all about defensive pressure against Texas if you're going to try to win the game. Kentucky can do it. Can they do it over the course of a whole game? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And on the other side, even if Kentucky can do it over the course of a whole game, like we just need to really dive deep into these offensive struggles. This offense has not scored more than 20 points all season per game. The only game that they've won in the SEC, they won 20-17 over Ole Miss. It seems like it was a blip ago. And, so even if they are able to play a strong defensive game offensively, it hasn't been clicking for them. Brock Vandergriff managed to throw an interception against Murray State, who's 1-10 on the season at the FCS level. And I think this Texas defense is sitting at number 1 in the SEC when it comes to passing yards given up. So it's going to be a long day, I think, for Kentucky, unless we see something that we haven't seen thus yet this season.
Yeah, there's no reason to think that Vandergriff Kentucky breakout performance is going to come this game against Texas. If you're going to do it, it could have come against somebody else. It's not going to come against Texas. To give them some credit, the thing that they've done well this season is some red zone defense. They're giving up a touchdown less than half of the time a team enters the red zone. 46% touchdown rate, 69% scoring rate, 4th best in the country, or 6th best in the country. So they're keeping teams out of the end zone when they get there. It's just how often will Texas live in that zone?
Yep.
It is the question, because they are throwing the ball a little bit deeper teams are throwing the ball a little bit deeper against Kentucky when they do. I think Texas has the opportunity to do that with the receiving weapons that they have. So I think Texas stretches it out a little bit and wins big.
Yeah, I like Texas in this one big as well. I mean, we talk about all the weapons. Matthew Golden, former Houston Cougar, he's been absolutely lighting it up. Quinn Ewers has had 7 touchdowns over the past 2 games, 5 touchdowns against Florida, 2 touchdowns last week, and no interceptions. And so they've been playing flawless football. I know we're all looking for that quality SEC win on their schedule. It's not going to come from this game, but we will see a win in this game in my book. I like Texas to cover in this one, 42-7.
Ooh, all right. I like 41-13. I think hammer the over in this game. I like the over. I think Texas could cover the over in this game solo.
Easily.
So,
Easily.
Just themselves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Texas, don't get caught sleeping. Don't start looking ahead to the next game. Take care of business here, and then start looking toward A&M SEC championship.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And so that rounds out our SEC game previews. When we look at around the country, we got some good games. I think the main headliner is going to be Indiana versus Ohio State. They're going to be traveling to Columbus, Ohio. It's going to be at noon. Ohio State's favored by 13.5. It's going to be the biggest game of the week. I mean, any thoughts on that one or any of the other Big Ten action?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see with that game. One team's got to lose. Do we see a 2-loss Ohio State team? Where do they put them if they've lost, those 2 ranked matchups with the win over Penn State? If Indiana loses that game, do they still kind of hang on into the playoffs? I don't think that Indiana is built for a game like this. The strength of schedule that they have to date, they're not. This will be a shock test for them. Can they do it? Absolutely. We saw Northwestern, and the score wouldn't tell you it. But if you watch the Northwestern-Ohio State game, Northwestern looked pretty strong early on, beat themselves with a couple of mistakes and let Ohio State kind of run away with it. So there's opportunities for Indiana. That's the biggest game of the week for playoff implications when you're looking at like the big dogs. There's some other games too that I think I might be watching a little bit more closely. Army Notre Dame probably being the biggest one.
Yeah, Army
Not
Notre
to jump
Dame.
around on you.
No, jump around. I mean, I guess you're gonna have Army Notre Dame on while you're watching Alabama, because Alabama is gonna be on ABC at 7, and then Army Notre Dame. I don't know the network, but it's gonna be at 7 p.m. as well. So I'm gonna guess it's Peacock NBC.
It is.
It's what Notre Dame primarily is broadcasting on.
Yeah,
that'll be an interesting one. Right now, it's number 24 Army, number 8 Notre Dame. That's the old CFP, so we'll get the new CFP rankings on Tuesday. We're recording here on Monday. That'll be an interesting one for sure. Notre Dame's favored by 14.
Yeah. And if for whatever reason Army can win this game, I think that Army looks better than Boise State on paper if they can win this game. So they start to maybe take that G5 spot. They're already locked for the American. This is a huge game for the playoffs because it takes Notre Dame. A Notre Dame win builds the resume, kind of solidifies them as a team that makes it, even though they don't play in a conference. Army, if they win this game, I think that they're the best G5 team. And now all of a sudden we have to start figuring out, do we get multiple G5s?
Yeah, that could be quite the dialogue if we get multiple G5s and Army wins. I think on the Notre Dame front, we need to have a discussion at some point about if we're just going to have them make the playoffs with 1 loss every year and kind of schedule this quasi ACC schedule. We need to figure that one out. But that's definitely the main independent G5 game. I'm sure Boise State fans are going to be watching that one very closely. Does Army have a shot, in your opinion, if they lose close. We've been talking about that close Oregon loss for Boise State. Is it not the same thing for them?
It's not the same thing just from the strength of schedule, and it would require them they would lose this game, go on to beat Tulane in the American. They need Boise State to lose a game maybe before the Mountain
Yeah.
West Championship, because the G5's got to get in. A G5 is
Yeah.
getting in somehow, but
They
they
are.
need if they lose this game, there's still a shot. So it would just be some sort of crazy scenario where Boise State loses a couple games, or they beat Tulane. It's all.
Right. You're thinking all things even, both teams with one loss. Boise State. Yeah. I'm giving the fans here, the listeners, brackets and buzz talk. So I'm gonna keep moving around the country. Between the ACC and the Big 12, the ACC specifically, it's kind of a snooze fest. We got the Citadels playing Clemson. I put this on around the country because Clemson took a SEC-esque scheduling tip by playing an FCS opponent, a local FCS opponent. Citadels in Charleston, if I'm not mistaken, or it's in South Carolina. So that's a big one.
Yeah.
SMU's playing Virginia. Virginia's 5-5. Yeah, they're kind of like the Minnesota of the ACC. SMU should take care of business. They're 9.5-point favorites. Pitt, Louisville. There's nothing really on the line from a playoff or ACC standpoint, but Louisville's 8.5. Should be good football if you enjoy good football. Wake Forest at Miami, noon. They love putting Miami on at noon. Miami is a 24-point favorite. I almost am like, if they don't win this game by 15, we need to have some discussions.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they play Syracuse the following week. This would be one that they should take handedly and not find themselves in another needing help situation. It's going to be one I'm keeping up with on the side. Ole Miss and Florida at the same time. So another week game for Miami in the ACC.
I think the main star outside the SEC we talked about the G5 independent game, Army Notre Dame. It's probably gonna be the Big 12, right? We talked about the one game in the Big 10, Indiana, Ohio State, but in the Big 12, we got BYU taking on Arizona State. Arizona right now is 21, the new AP 3.5-point favorites against BYU. I think this is terrible scheduling on the Big 12's part because they put this game and they put Colorado and Kansas at the same time at 3:30 Eastern, understanding the amount of eyeballs that Colorado draws, and this conference kind of needing some more viewership. Nonetheless, Colorado's playing Kansas. Kansas is pretty red hot right now. Been playing, playoff slayer for some of these teams. They're sitting there. Colorado's favored by 3. Any thoughts on these games in the Big 12?
Well, it's three of these 4 teams taking Kansas out of the situation are the 3 top teams in the Big 12. You throw Iowa State in there as well as to round out your top teams in the standings. This is it. Like these games are really who is going to be getting a shot to make the playoffs. Someone from the Big 12 will be getting in. If Arizona State beats BYU, Kansas beats Colorado, there's a chance here for an Arizona State, Iowa State Big 12 championship. And that's kind of crazy that one of those teams will get in. But they'd earn their spot there. I mean, Arizona State, I don't think that BYU should drop to 14 in the CFP rankings like they did in the AP. I think that they'll keep them maybe a little bit higher than that. They are 1 loss. They have ranked wins. I don't think that they should drop that far. But I think Arizona State has a great shot to win this game. They're favored. I think Kansas right now, they 2 in a row. What's one more against another ranked team? So
closer spread in that game than the Utah Colorado game last week too, right? Obviously, I understand that Kansas is fully healthy, but Utah's kind of had more prestige of late when it comes to a program that can win some of these games and play spoiler. But Vegas in some ways they like Kansas here. The 3-point spread, given how good Colorado's offense has looked, is pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think Kansas will play just to the level of the opponent, and that's a good thing for them. Sometimes it can work out like that, but they find themselves at the end of games hanging on for a win or finding a drive to get a win. So as long as they play to the level of Colorado, I like Kansas having a shot here.
Okay. I do like Colorado in this one, but I do think Kansas has a shot. Don't get me wrong. I definitely think Kansas has a shot. We always try to show love to all the games around the country. I think you kind of hit it on earlier in this segment. Not a ton of these games are going to pull your attention away from some of the SEC games. I think Indiana and Ohio State at noon would pull my attention away from the Ole Miss Florida one, I would dual screen it, but I think it's worth watching just to kind of see,
Yeah.
does Indiana look like a playoff team? Like, this is an
Yeah.
opportunity to show, like, at least with Penn State when they played, Ohio State is close. Indiana has the opportunity to show us that they at least can hang, and if they win, I mean, you put them at number one, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they make a case for it. I think this is one of those games where margin matters. So, like in Indiana, if they do lose big, then I think that they will find themselves out of the top 12. If they lose close, I think that they could still find themselves in there. So it'll be an interesting one where personally, I think margin of victory matters.
I think so for sure in this one. Last point, I feel like someone stole my tweet, and I saw a post and it was like, how is this supposed to be top games in the Big Ten when these spreads are like over 10? And I was like, I feel like I said this like a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Every week we look at these games between Penn State and Indiana, and it's like Penn State, Indiana, and Ohio State. All these games are like 10 plus spreads. There's just no close games. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. The top heavy conferences, they're going to get the ones in that they know they're going to get in. SEC, to start out the year, you didn't know who was going to make it. You had the usual favorites, but now we have Ole Miss up there.
Yep.
Tennessee up there. You got a lot of teams that haven't made the playoffs and haven't found themselves in that spot there. Whereas in the Big Ten, you have kind of the usuals.
The usuals minus Michigan, add in Indiana.
Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Indiana won't be there long.
We'll see. We'll definitely see. I mean, Vegas doesn't think so. So we'll definitely see. And so thank you, everyone that watched this episode. Thank you for tuning in. This is a new SEC podcast. Please like, follow, subscribe. If you like content like this, game previews, game recaps, CFP ranking talk, subscribe and make it easy for yourself to find content like this. And until next time,